Hello class. The last lecture we talked about aerobic respiration and the stages that are included with it. So glycolysis is one of the stages. It does not require oxygen. The citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation cycle did require oxygen. It did result in a huge amount of ATP being released into our cell. Now we're going to look at anaerobic respiration, which does not require oxygen at all. So first things first, it does still undergo glycolysis, and it is going to actually release and create 2 ATP, whether it's anaerobic or aerobic, which means there's oxygen available or there's no oxygen available. It does couple with fermentation to produce ATP. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like if we're talking about yeast. Yeast will actually create alcohol in the process of alcohol fermentation. So remember, at the very beginning of aerobic respiration, which requires oxygen, we went from a glucose molecule to 2-pyruvate because glycolysis does not require oxygen. So the same thing is going to occur right here in alcohol fermentation. After glycolysis, we have a result of 2 net ATP as well as 2 NADHs, which are electron carriers. But instead of undergoing the citric acid cycle and the electron transport chain, because we can't go that route because we don't have oxygen here, what we're going to do instead is this next stage. We're going to have a release of carbon dioxide, and we're going to actually transform pyruvate through chemical reactions into 2-acetaldehyde. After that happens, those actual electron carriers release those electrons and get sent back as 2 NADHs. It's been oxidized. So the oxidized 2 NADH leaves out, and we have the result of our 2 ethanol molecules. This is what's called alcohol fermentation. Once again, glycolysis still occurs, but after that, we will not undergo the normal aerobic respiration stages. We will actually go this route and result in the ethanol alcohol at the very end. This is also how beer, wine, and bread are made. So pyruvate, once again, is converted to those 2 ethyl alcohol in those 2 steps. And remember that release of carbon dioxide here as well. Now let's go ahead and look at lactic acid fermentation. So this is what's occurring in humans, because obviously we don't have yeast in our actual bodies that can create alcohol, although I'm pretty sure a lot of people would love that. We actually have a buildup of lactic acid occur. So what happens here is, once again, glycolysis is the same thing as before in those other 2. Glucose gets broken down. We have a release of 2 net ATP as well as 2 electron carriers, NADH, and the 2 3-carbon molecules known as pyruvate. There is no intermediate here. Pyruvate accepts the electrons from the NADH that's getting reduced, and that results in 2 lactate molecules or lactic acid fermentation. This also occurs with some fungi and bacteria, and we actually use it to make yogurt and cheese. So pyruvate is considered to be reduced to NADH, and that forms the lactic acid as a waste. Here is cellular respiration as a whole in summary. So first, we'll go around the area that we just went over in this lecture, which is the anaerobic respiration route. We have a glucose. That glucose undergoes glycolysis in the cytoplasm, and if there's no oxygen available here, it will actually go into anaerobic respiration. There's 2 forms of anaerobic respiration. There's alcohol fermentation, which results in those 2 ethanol alcohol, or in humans, we actually have a buildup of lactic acid formed, and that results in those 2 lactate molecules being formed at the very end. This is also said to be why we start cramping when we're at the gym, because of the lactic acid buildup actually causes your muscles to start cramping. Now that is if there's no oxygen available. So obviously when you're working out, you work out a little too strenuously, you're not intaking as much oxygen as you should at that point for your body to undergo cellular respiration. So this is when that lactic acid builds up. So you're still breathing, but you're just not breathing as quickly as you need to intake oxygen so that this reaction can occur through this route. So that's why it ends up with lactic acid buildup. Now the other route that we can go, which is what we talked about in the previous lecture, is glucose undergoing glycolysis. Once again, same thing in the cytoplasm, but now we have oxygen available. So that's when we go the route going over here towards the mitochondria, where we finally go through the Krebs cycle and then the electron transport chain or oxidative phosphorylation area, and that results in a way much larger ATP result. So the difference between anaerobic respiration and aerobic is the net yield of ATP. Look at this right here. This right here, we only create 2 ATP. Right here, we only create 2. But if we have oxygen, we are able to create a multitude more of ATP molecules available. That's important because remember, we want to be able to break that ATP bond apart and release that energy that we use in our cells every single second. So this would be a much better route for us to go because of how much energy our body needs. And that is the end of cellular respiration.